that you actually sat in the last row of classrooms for days at a time? What was that like?
Yeah, we sat in the back of classrooms and they didn't know what we were doing there, and we were making notes on our mobile phones about what they were saying, so they thought we were just texting each other and not interested, but actually we were absorbing what was going on and the dynamics and the nature of female friendship and the different groups, and there was a lot to absorb. And I was sitting with the casting director, Lucy Pardee, who's also a researcher, and through that came lots of ideas. And then we invited some of those girls and some other girls into this workshop process and really carried on a process of research, but also improvising, doing drama exercises, getting to know one another, building trust. So it served multi-purposes in a way.
And what made you then decide, okay, we're going to focus on this age group as opposed to another age group, right? Because that wasn't even clear when you started.
It wasn't. No, we were looking at a whole age range. I mean, we landed on the idea of 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. And that actually was exactly the age that my daughter is. So I think I was particularly plugged into that. But they were coming to the workshops, and the whole creative team was responding to that age group, because they're on the cusp. They're just changing. They're not girl, they're not woman. Sometimes they're incredibly adult and you think, wow, they're wise. And then the next minute they're giggling because they farted or something. So, they're a combination of children and adult all the time. And there's something incredible about that moment where you change.
That actually spoke to me a lot. I felt that obviously what was so poignant about the narrative arc of the film is that Rocks is put into this situation where she goes from being a girl to the mom almost instantly. And I think there was a part of me at one point that thought, well, why can't she just get it together, right? I mean, as in, because she has this presence to her, and she has this maturity to her. But then what was so brilliant about the film is that, of course, you would show, no, these are just girls, and we expect so much from girls.
Yeah, that was one of the big themes, particularly Teresa Okoko, who's British Nigerian, grew up in Hackney, was talking about how young girls, particularly Black and brown girls, get adultized. So they sometimes, they look older than they are, and they get treated as though they're older, and they get expected to behave in older ways, and it's a real pressure. And also there are, communities like that are living in difficult situations where the children are sometimes the carers, so they're taking on this incredible responsibility. And we wanted to show, exactly as you said, that really they should be allowed to be children.
Right, and that's what was so jarring to me at a certain point, as I thought, why am I looking at her as an adult? And because, of course, she's caring for her younger brother. And I think that was such a wise choice to include the younger brother, who was completely a child, and how she needed to protect him. And she was trying to protect his childhood, but who was protecting her childhood?
Exactly, yeah. And that little boy was quite a character. So she really, as an actor, she had her job cut out, just looking after him on set.
Right. So I'd love to talk about the characters, the real life women and girls behind this film. I mean, most of the characters we saw, non-actors, right? Or first-time actors?
Yeah, almost entirely. And in fact, Bookie, who plays Rocks, and Kosar, who plays her best friend, and D'Angelo, none of them, the little boy, none of them had acted before. And in fact, they didn't even do much drama at school. They did a bit of drama, but they weren't, the best in their class or anything. And it wasn't like they'd ever considered a career in the theatre or in film. They'd never considered it. So it was really a journey for them of discovery, which they took to. They just became more and more excited by the idea of acting.
And so they saw a notice in their classroom, or how did you even reach out to this community of non-actors?
Yeah, so it was a long, involved process, which really was led by Lucy Pardee, the casting director, who's cast American Honey for Andrew Arnold and lots of other street casting films. And we were in the school and we saw Bookie, who plays Rocks, a lot. And she was a very naughty girl in the classroom. She'd turn up for the drama class 15 minutes late, and he'd say go to detention, and she'd leave straight away and not take part, so she was naughty. But and they were all the naughty girls, actually, the ones we cast. But they were also fun. But we invited them, we talked to them in their break times, and we invited them to this workshop, and it was the ones who stayed who were the ones that became part of the cast, really, the ones who were most interested. and became friends. They formed this sort of electric bond between each other.
Amazing. There was one scene that tears actually did come to my eyes, and it was the scene between Buki and Kosar with the cake in the cafeteria. I would love, just, you know, as the director, could you unpack that scene for us, please?
You mean when they reconcile at the very end?
Yes, yeah. At the very end, and she pushes the cake toward her. That did me in.
Well, we discussed that a lot. You know, what could be the nature of reconciliation? Did it need to be a big action, a small action? And then, you know, Teresa, who was the story creator, and talking to the girls, it was like, actually, often you'll make up in one tiny moment. It just takes one tiny shift, and then you're back together again. I mean, it was a complicated scene to shoot, because we were working in the summer holidays. All the girls in that scene were girls who we'd met in the process. They were all real school children. The teachers were all real teachers. You know, we were working in a very real environment, but we were there in the summer holidays when no one else was there. And the two girls who play the leads found it so painful that they couldn't be friends. You know, we had to kind of say, you know, they had to act this role of falling apart. So when they came back together again, they were so delighted that they could then hug and be friends again, because they love each other.
Oh my gosh.
They're still yeah.
That's okay. So then I'd love to hear more about that, because then of course the scene where Buki is at Kosar's home and they both dissolve into tears. How, as a director, were you able to work with these young women and bring them to tears?
Yeah. Well, we had, one, they worked a lot with me and the rest of the creative team, and we had 75% women behind the camera. In fact, on set, we had more, because we had female camera takes entirely, female boom operators. And so it was a very, and young, and often from backgrounds like the kids. So they were very familiar with the setup. They were very relaxed. We ran 2 cameras at all times. We never said action. We ran very, very long takes. They never had to hit mark, so they could move wherever they liked. We didn't light so that they could only be in certain places. So they had a lot of freedom, and they could try things out, and they could rehearse on camera. And so, you know, it was all a case of sort of just gradually warming up into those moments. And quite often I talked to them through the scene, like, what are you feeling now? And where might you go? And, you know, for the poor editor then had 150 hours of footage to go through, and also all the iPhone footage as well, to find the moments that could cut together, because it was totally lacking in continuity. You know, it was very chaotic.
Wow. Okay, so I did want to speak about the editor. I read a little bit about her, and I saw that she's worked on documentaries. Is that, if I'm not mistaken?
She has worked on some documentaries, but also some fiction. But yeah, and it was actually brilliant that she wasn't intimidated. A lot of people would be intimidated by that amount of footage. And also, we didn't do front boards, we did end boards. So it was, you know, from a technical point of view, it was very loose. And you didn't have all the usual structures in place that you have when you shoot drama. It was more like a documentary in that way, in terms. And we shot in chronological order, so that the kids got hold of the story, which was great for the story, but a nightmare for the production, because we went into the school and we blocked the drain and we caused chaos, and then we left, and then we came back 2 days later and we caused chaos again, and then we left, you know, because we were shooting in story order. So it was complicated.
I have so many questions. Okay, so how did you gain that trust with the schools? I mean, and the teachers, and the communities, and with one another? I mean, it doesn't seem like there are many schools out there that are saying, yes, please come shoot a feature film in our campus.
I mean, the teachers were drawn from a few local schools, and the kids were drawn from a few local schools. So yeah, it was a bit of a sort of hodgepodge. But it was a lot about time. It was, you know, in a kind of documentary process, hanging out with people, getting to know people. But also the kids were from those communities, so we weren't kind of going in as outsiders. We were going in. They were the insiders. So, for example, that scene in the Somali household. You know, Kosar, who plays Samaya, invited us into our home. The production designer was there looking at the kind of food that they'd have at an event like that. And then on the day, this man showed up who actually, you know, for the family scene, and he wasn't meant to do anything. He's the man who sang in the scene and talked about the frog. But he came up to me and said, you know what, I can sing. And so I said, oh, can you? You know, and then, but of course, then the producers went, we're going to have to get the rights, and we had to track down the rights in Somalia. There's like very complicated rights situations with songs, but he did write it, so he's delighted because he got a music credit on the film as well.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. Wow. Okay. So in terms then of shooting in order, so then the last scene in Hastings, was that your last shooting day?
Well, we did slightly cheat in that we did a few little pickups and a few things
Okay.
out of order, but not much. But yeah, the Hastings, and we had a very different ending that was written, because we had an ending where she actually takes him out of the school and all the friends take him to the beach and then they return him. And it was in the edit that we decided to change that. And we sort of shot the potential for that. So we were okay. We had that where she just looks at him and decides not to take him. But yeah, that was, but it was interesting going to Hastings because a lot of the girls had never been outside London, and going to see the sea for the first time and being in a new environment, you know, was all kind of for real. So there was a lot they could draw on, although they were definitely playing storylines that weren't their own. But in terms of their personalities and their backgrounds, they were using a lot of knowledge they had.
And in terms of the writer, Teresa Coco, now the way it worked, from what I understand, is that she would bring the story to the girls and say, does this jive with you? Is this okay? It was that democratic?
It was pretty democratic. I mean, yeah, we were sharing things, and she did that. She did a kind of writer's room scenario with Claire, who was co-writer, and she stuck post-it notes on the wall of each scene, and then they said, yeah, do this, or how about that, and they all talked about it. And so they were very involved. And then on the set, you know, after each take, I talked to them and say, how did that feel? And they really, I mean, I'm used to actors telling me what they think, but this was quite something else. You know, like one scene, Kosar, who plays Samir, came up to me and she went, I've just got to tell you something, Sarah. The way this scene is playing out, we've been shooting for about 3 hours. She went, it's dead, it's totally dead. And I went, oh. And so we went back and we thought about it and we reshot it, you know, because she had said that it wasn't working and it wasn't natural, it wasn't what they'd be doing. So, you know, we were listening to their feedback quite a lot.
It's stunning. And so then Teresa and Claire would go back and make the notes and rewrite based on the day's events.
Yeah, they would, but there was also sometimes it was just about the staging. It wasn't about the writing, it was about the way that it was kind of playing out, less about the content.
Wow. And I thought an interesting choice too was the choice that there were no adults that saved them. That happens a lot of times. There was a moment there when the dance teacher came to her home, and I thought, oh, okay, finally, we have someone saving the girls. That was an interesting choice, and I'm curious how that played out in the writers' room and with the young women as well, the girls.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that these things you're picking up on, because in a way they seemed so logical when we were doing it. I mean, Teresa came up with that storyline, but it all seemed to make total sense that, you know, these girls are left to their own devices, and that they're a whisker away from the social services at all times, and they don't want, you know, that represents fear for them, and they've got lots of bad experiences. You know, it was the white girl that called the social services because it doesn't represent that for her, but the authorities for some of those Black and brown communities, they're really feared. So it was a kind of interesting thing that they didn't want to engage adults, they didn't trust the adults. You know, so they kept it amongst their friends, and in a way the friends were the support network, the friends became the family, which we with a lot of girls when we were talking to them in research was the case.
Okay, and I found that I did want to speak a bit about the race issue and just the way that breaks down in the film. And I think what was stunning is that, of course, these friendships crossed race lines and religious lines. And I'd love to hear your feedback on how you saw that play out during your research when you were sitting in the back, you know, of the grade 9 class.
Well, it was really striking how those friendships were cross-cultural. And in a way, I mean, if you go into an inner London city school, you'll see that kind of friendship group with that diversity of ethnicities. I mean, often, you know, it will sometimes not have any white girls, but it will have a Bangladeshi girl, a Congolese girl, a Nigerian girl, a Somali girl, you know, and we had a Polish gypsy girl. She calls herself Polish gypsy. So you'll have those different, and in a way they enjoy the banter. They enjoy exchanging, you know, what they eat and what they say at home. And they have these lives, as you see in the film, that at home, their home life is so different from their school life. And somehow at school, they're all equal and all love each other and all get on. But then they go back to these very, very different home lives. But they connect because they all know that they've got these different home lives.
Right. And how did they relate to you and with your background, and how did you build trust with them?
Well, I was definitely the one who was learning the most, and I self-confessed, that we built a team. I mean, I couldn't have authored this story and I couldn't have made this film without the creative team around, who collaborated in a very egalitarian way, and there wasn't really a hierarchy, and it wasn't about me telling anyone what to do. It was really about me listening and learning, and so it was a very different process in that way. And I had an associate director called Anu Henriquez, who's a young woman of color, who was there, talking to me, and I was bouncing ideas of Teresa and Claire and lots of other people on the set, who came from the backgrounds close to the kids. So I mean, they just thought I was like some mother, some sort of weird, strange mother who was interested in them. I mean, one of the things they said is that normally no adults listen to us, and you seem to want to listen to. I mean, we were fascinated. We were hanging on every word, and as a consequence, they're telling us everything. Because of course, if you listen and you're not judging, I mean, we had to keep a safeguarding role if they told us anything worrying, but beyond that, they could tell us anything, and we were interested. Whereas most adults have an agenda of a kind, so don't listen much.
And when was this film shot? What year was it?
Well, it's quite a long time ago now, because we were due to release it in lockdown, like the beginning of lockdown, we cancelled. So that was a real journey. So it was due to release last year, and it was shot and made the year before. So, now these girls have grown up. I've watched them grow up. In fact, I've watched them for 4 years. I met them when they were 14, and now they're 17. It's big.
Wow. I have a lot of questions about that too. I think the reason I asked when it was shot is that, especially given the past year, and the moment that we're in terms of race and racial reckonings, I personally, as an American, found it very interesting to see the idea of race and racism play out in Britain. And it is different. It's not the same, but I do think that there's what to learn and glean from all international audiences.
Yeah, I really think there is. And watching what happened during last summer with the killing of George Floyd and then Black Lives Matter protests, the girls and their communities were so impacted by that in Britain. And, the girls became activists. They set up websites, education websites, and made flyers and posted them on trees and delivered them through people's doors, and drew up reading lists about Black lives. And, they really became engaged. It was interesting. It was great to see, actually, how they harnessed that energy from that devastating event.
Right. And what's also, I've again read a little bit about the characters. They said, had it not been for this film, they would have never had the access to become an actor or creator involved with film. And so what's happening with these young women? Where are they now? What are they up to? What are the dreams they've divulged to you?
Well, they're definitely on my WhatsApp very regularly. And it's amazing, if you look at the group WhatsApp, it's like kind of priceless. I only understand about half of it because I don't know what's going on. But yeah, Buki and Kosar are very interested in acting, and they're exploring, well, in fact, both of them have made things since. So that's exciting. And we wanted to create an atmosphere where they could be inspired to think that, you have to see it to be it, that they could one day be a director or a writer or a camera person or a producer or a costume designer. So, we since we made the film, a group of the crew have set up an organization called Bridge, which I'm sort of supporting from the sidelines, but not a part of, where they are there to help the young people should they want to access the industry, because it's a notoriously difficult industry to access. And should they want to have an ongoing career, so that they don't just feel dropped, that they've had one experience and now there's no support. So if they want to audition, they can talk and they can have feedback. And so it's meant to be there to support them.
Amazing. That's great. And I'm so curious about, well, two things. One, we'll start here. Just the previous films you made were pretty typical in the sense of they were not democratic processes with non-actors. So I'd love, to hear your perspective comparing your previous films to this one, and how you'll think moving forward about new projects you're going to take on.
Yeah, I mean, it is very different. So, with Suffragette, I was working with very established actors, who had a lot of experience. And then you know, you get so much from them, and it's a wonderful experience, but it's also still about getting to understand who they are as people and what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And in a way, it's a similar process with non-actors, but, well, first-time actors, let's call them, because they now are actors. But the key difference really with the newcomers is that it was all about making them feel at ease, because they're just not used to the trappings of a film set. And so we were trying to remove all the inhibiting things that you normally have around you, which professional actors are so used to, and they know how to switch in and switch off the fact that they're doing that. So it did feel like a very different process, but both of them creatively energizing and both of them exciting to me. I mean, I have to say on this one, I learned a lot. I definitely learned a lot about, you know, race and young people, and how much young people have incredible potential if we have the structures in place to support them. But unfortunately, you know, and certainly in Britain, for the last 10 years, we've been depleting youth hubs and youth services and foster care, and they've all been underfunded. So young people have really been left high and dry, and even through COVID. And it's just so vital, because you watch, when you mentor kids, like these kids we've kind of mentored, how they flourish, you know. I mean, Bookie rings up and says, oh, I'm practicing Shakespeare and I'm reading this book and I'm doing it. I mean, they're just, you know, top of their game and got so much to offer, but we need to support them.
Right. And that is something I definitely wanted to speak to you about in terms of the pandemic. I mean, this is happening not only with your film and your project, but all over the world with these, especially more independent films and even the more established films. I mean, just the pandemic really sidelining them, really shifting the way that we view the arts, really shifting the way that we engage with audiences and how we share culture. And I mean, I would love to hear ideas you have, where you see things that are broken, where you see an opportunity for change and to really create something new.
I mean, it's a precarious, difficult moment, and the arts have suffered hugely, you know, world over, particularly live arts like live theatre, and that's been devastating. So I think we really need to pay attention and work out how to support them going forward. I mean, film and television has been less affected than, you know, theatre, but still affected. I think we've learned that we need entertainment. I mean, personally, you know, my admiration for doctors and teachers has zoomed through the roof during this time, and they're the heroes of this period, no doubt. But we do need entertainment, and we need storytelling, and we need outlets for people, and we need to make that, it's an opportunity, I think, for a reset, you know, when dramatic things happen. If there can be a silver lining, and out of the Black Lives Matter movement, as out of the Me Too movement, you know, people are paying more attention to who's on our screens and who's behind our screens and what kind of stories we're telling. And I think we really need to focus on that now, because if we expand the nature of our storytelling and who's telling the stories, we'll have a richer industry, we'll have a broader audience, we'll have greater understanding of different cultures and different people and identities, and it can only be a better thing. So we've got to work on that now.
And do you find that that's also taking hold of the British film industry? Because I've seen quite a bit in Hollywood, there's a bit of a new direction and emphasis. Is that also happening in your community?
Definitely. And it's been a kind of exciting period for people looking at themselves, looking at their own institutions, thinking about what stories we should tell and who should tell them. And, you know, I definitely think going forward that I hope that the young people in the communities that we were telling go on to tell their own stories. That it's not people who look like me who are directing, it's people who look like them who are directing. We need many more directors from different walks of life. And you can feel that happening in the industry, but it's going to take a lot of work. And I think what I learned from Rocks is you can't just plonk people in a position, you have to support them, you have to recognize that they didn't come from a background with networks, that they haven't got a financial net under them. You know, you have to support people if you want people to be able to move into the industry.
Right, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on that point specifically. It's all good to talk that talk, but it's kind of like we need what you did. That's what's amazing about this film. You did this already and started this process, but we've got to like reach beyond the typical spaces and places that we find our storytellers from, because those are the voices that need to be encouraged. Exactly. So before I let you go, I'd love to hear if you're working on any other projects, what's speaking to you these days.
I am. Right now I'm doing a film for a charity, so that's kind of a labour of love, but really exciting. But and it's short, you know. But I'm also developing a number of ideas. It's too early to talk about them, but I'll keep you posted. I'll let you know.
Okay.
So yeah.
Please do. This was an absolute joy to speak with you. I personally am very inspired by your work and the creativity and diversity and just energy that you've brought to your project. So thank you for joining us, and I hope we connect soon in person.
Great, thank you so much. Real pleasure.
Take care.